everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari ST A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari ST games, some which I grew up with and some which are new to me. Today is one of the former. Today we are looking at Fastlane, the Spice Engineering Challenge. This was a 1989 release from Artronic Products, developed by a company called The Attic. Now, Artronics did a couple of other things that I'm vaguely familiar with that we'll probably see on this series at some point. The Attic, I have no idea. Looking on Atari Mania, this may be the only thing that they did. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong now, but I can't find anything else that, that this developer supposedly put out. So it was later re-released, I think about a year later, by simulation specialist Digital Integration on their Action 16 label. So that was a budget price label that saw this game get another release. Now, the aim of this game is to provide a realistic simulation of C1 sports car racing, including endurance events that run into the night and that sort of thing. Now, obviously that's said with the caveat that technology was a little bit limited at the time, so you were never going to get a completely realistic simulation, but they had a good old go. They had a good crack at it. In fact, it was very well received at the time of its original release. Looking up some old reviews from this, ST User in particular really liked this. And in the sort of super test of driving games that they did, one issue where they were comparing various different things together, they said that this game is to motor racing what Falcon is to flight simulators. Now, that is high praise indeed if you're at all familiar with Falcon, which was one of the best military flight sims on the Atari ST. I haven't played this for a while. I remember not liking it a ton when I was a kid, but I was a kid, and so I wasn't quite so familiar with the more sort of simulation style of driving games. So my thoughts may have changed on there, and sort of reading comments from the time make me interested to give this another go. So I'm not going to say whether they're talking nonsense or not, but anyway. So as you can see, I do have a hard copy of this. So let's take a look at what we've got here. So there's the front cover, a nice photograph of one of the, what are they called? C1 sports cars. They're the ones that look like that. I sort of most readily associate them with like the Le Mans 24-hour race and that sort of thing. And here's the back with some screenshots. As you can see, this is a first-person perspective racing game, which was quite unusual at the time. So yeah, this was one reason that I wanted to like this game, because I've spoken a few times before about how when I was a kid, I sort of almost fantasized about things I'd be able to do when I was older. Not like that. But things like driving. And so any game that gave me the opportunity to sort of put myself in a virtual cockpit and see things from a first-person perspective and imagine that I was actually sitting there in that car doing those things, I was really excited about that sort of thing. Now, Fastlane, like I say, I didn't love back then, mostly due to its sound, I have to say. But also I just don't remember enjoying it quite as much as some other games that did similar things, such as Lombard RAC Rally, which we've previously seen on this series, and Test Drive 2 as well from Accolade, which will probably come up at some point. But anyway, yeah, so that's what we have to expect on this one. So let's just have a read of what the blurb says. Fastlane, capitalized incorrectly, is an accurate simulation of the Group C driving experience. As you hurtle down the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans, or through the forests of the Nürburgring, however you pronounce that, in Germany, you will experience the fear and rush of adrenaline that most of today's elite sports racing drivers fight with. Wrestle with the brute power of your car and learn to command its instrumentation and warning systems. Can you get your pit crew to pass you through the pit lane fast enough? And have you the nerve to keep your foot down hard enough through the night? So, bullet points. Technically accurate in-car simulation of Spice Engineering's SE89C Cosworth-powered C1 racing car. It's very specific. Set your car up mechanically for practice sessions and racing. Yeah, this was sort of one of the simulation aspects of this game. It actually was one of the first games I remember seeing where you can actually sort of tune your car for various different circumstances. Not entirely sure how much of an impact that actually had on the gameplay, but the option was there, certainly. Race into the night time against 20 other top drivers. Yeah, again, this had a day-night cycle and the ability to turn your lights on and that sort of thing. Manage your pit crew for rapid pit stops. So yeah, there were timed pit stops in this. They were real time, so you had to quickly choose your options, fill up with fuel, change your tyres, that sort of thing. Set up your car for varying circuit and weather conditions. they've already said that. Race for the World Championship on all the different championship circuits, and all racing and pit stops are in real time. So, yeah, and that's from Artronic, who are based in Yorkshire. Harrogate, to be precise. All right, let's have a look inside the box. So, we have a couple of discs. 2 discs, to be precise. I'm not sure if the final discs would have looked like that, because this would have been one of many games that we got as review copies when my father and my brother were working on Page 6 magazine. We got a lot of pre-release copies of stuff. That's where most of the stuff behind me comes from. Yeah, I've got a big collection that very little of which I paid for, which is fantastic. But yeah, that also meant sometimes we got things like this, where there's just a sort of sticky label on a disc that didn't actually say what the game was. And so you can probably just see there that my dad actually went through and wrote on what was on that disc, just so we could refer back to it. We have what looks like a poster. Yeah, here we are. So that's a poster with just the art from the front of the box, basically. Nice photographs of some cars going very fast. And then we have a manual, which is just a black and white affair and printed slightly wonkily. So, the object of the game is ultimately to win the C1 Racing Drivers World Championship title by competing in races at 9 different circuits around the world. Yeah, so it then goes through and gives you a bit of explanation of what all the controls are. This bit is actually quite interesting because you have the ability to do things like turn your electrics in your car on and off and that sort of thing. But for some reason, you only need to do those things if you're doing a practice race. For some reason, they decided not to include that in the championship races. Whereas I would have thought it would make more sense to do that the other way around. So sort of with the championship mode being the main game mode, you would expect to sort of have to engage with the simulation in a bit more depth, but I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, so there are a lot of interesting sim-like elements in this. So like you can stall your car if you're in too high a gear, for example. You have to manage your fuel levels and what state your tyres are in and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, and then moving on, we've got a bit of technical data about the car itself. And we've got some information about the drivers who are featured in the game as well. So rather than playing yourself in this, you're playing one of several real-world racing drivers. So for example, we've got Gordon Spice, which is presumably who Spice Engineering is named after. Born in 1940. Lived in Old Windsor in 1989. After working in Australia and the USA, Gordon first raced in 1962 in an MGTF, followed by a Morgav Plus 4. The 1988 season was perhaps the best yet. I'm skipping a bit. Was perhaps the best yet, with Ray Belm as partner in the new SE88C. Gordon won the C2 category in 7 out of 11 World Series races. This year he's taken time off from racing to concentrate on his Spice PLC motor accessory business, but the lure of Le Mans is too much to keep Le Patron away from the big event. See photo. So yeah, you can play as Gordon Spice if you wish to. And here's all the circuits that are featured in the game. So with this being it's sort of implemented as kind of a vanishing point racer with sprite-based obstacles and cars and that sort of thing. So they're not sort of one-to-one recreations of that sort of thing, but they do follow the sort of pattern of the circuits and so on. Yeah, and then we've got a little bit of information about the how the game was put together as well. This is quite interesting. So Fastlane was developed in conjunction with the engineers and technicians at Spice Engineering Limited, Silverstone. It struck me that there had not before been a software motor racing simulator developed in this way before. We do not as a company develop arcade conversions, and the search for sound commercial original titles is not an easy one. In Fastlane, we've tried to make the player think like a sports car racing driver has to do, not only in terms of how to drive fast and stay on the circuit, but also to delve into the way one has to consider the management of the car itself. To actually combine the attributes of simulation with strong gameplay is one of the hardest mixtures to achieve. Whilst every technical aspect of this product has been designed in conjunction with the Spice Racing team, the gameplay and the excellent graphics have been designed by Artronic, with the actual coding and graphics being done by The Attic. 68,000 coding, so that's the 16-bit processor, that would have been Atari ST and Amiga, has been written by David Bowler, who has worked professionally as a programmer since 1986, having written Winter Events and Formula One. Doesn't say who those are by. He's experienced in 6809E and 68000. The coding for Fastlane began in February 1989 and was completed August 1989. It's a far cry from today's games, isn't it? The graphics were designed by Sean McClure, who surprisingly has only worked professionally as a graphic artist since 1987. He's completed projects such as Excalibur, Gary Lineker's Super Skills and Subterranea. Both lads come from the South Yorkshire region and remain fiercely independent as a design team. The graphics for Fastlane were completed within a continuous 7-month period, 2 discs being required to occupy the levels of graphics and coding. The storyboard, design and original idea coupled to project management has been the responsibility of Peter Wilkinson, the director of Daltronics. So that's, yeah, it's cool to sort of see commentary like that from developers and publishers. This is not something we tend to get a whole lot these days. Sometimes you might get a developer commentary track if you're lucky. Some games even sort of make that a feature where you can play through the game again and actually listen to the developers talking about various things as you go. But yeah, it's always cool to see stuff like that in manuals from back in the day. Sort of a bit of insight onto how it was put together, why it was put together, and how different game development from that era was today. All right, I've rambled on long enough, so without further ado, let's go play Fastlane. Okay, here we are with Fastlane, the Spice Engineering Challenge by Artronic Products and The Attic. So, as I said in the excuse me, as I said in the intro, this is an attempt to create a sort of convincing racing simulation on the Atari ST. With, I don't know, mixed results. You'll see. So we've got a few options along the way. We can have FX on or music on. This only applies to the menu. So if you choose FX on, you just have pinging noises. Whereas if you have music on, you have music accompanying the menus, which is a bit more nice and cheerful. So let's jump straight into the championship and see how we get on. So you have to choose the driver first of all. You can be Gordon Spice, E. Salazar, Ray Belm, or T. Thiering. Let's be T. Thiering. He looks like a cheerful chap. In fact, I can probably tell you something about him. Thanks to the manual. You bear with me. Thorkild Thiering. Born the 24th of the 10th, 1953 in Copenhagen, Denmark. Lives in Copenhagen. Denmark's most successful race driver by number of wins, starting in Formula Ford in Denmark in 1976, moving to England to race for Chevron and Ralt in Formula 3. In 1978, finished 5th overall. Scandinavian Sports 2000 champion in 1983. He joined BP Spice in 1988, winning the C2 category at Silverstone and Spa. He was runner-up in the Drivers C2 World Championship in 1988. There you go. So we got quite a set of shoes to fill. So, the C1 Championship 1989 goes around Suzuka, Dijon-Prenois, Le Mans, Horama, Brands Hatch, Nürburgring, Spa-Francorchamps, Donington and Road Atlanta. So we begin with Suzuka on April the 9th. And then we have the obligatory bit of flickering colours because we're playing a pirate copy. And then we can check out a few bits of information before we actually start the race. So you can get a bit of information about the course. It's 2 miles long. We do 10 laps. There's 16 entrants in this race. And there's a bit more about our driver. Not that that's in any way relevant to what we do. There's the specs of your car, should you want to know. Those are all also listed in more detail in the manual. And probably the only really thing that's relevant in here is the championship table, which obviously everyone has 0 points at the minute because we haven't done any races yet. So let's correct that. And off we go. So first thing you have to do is set up your car. So weather report, very hot and dry. So we need to choose some appropriate tyres for that. So let's go for some slicks. Medium density. And then nothing else we really need to change. Most of the other stuff in here is for repairing stuff when you're in the pits in the middle of a race. So the main thing you want to change before you do that is is your tyres, and I think you can adjust your suspension as well. But I'm not 100% sure what that does, so we'll leave that for now. Make sure you're full of fuel, which we are, and then press escape to qualify. And then another bit of flickery loading. Then you get this slightly misleading start race screen. I remember playing this for the first time and thinking, God, it'd be really cool if the game looked like that. It doesn't. It looks like this. Which is still not bad, to be fair. I mean, that cockpit's pretty neat. But I remember being a bit disappointed by the sound in particular in this. One thing I will say is that as much as an unpleasant drone that engine tone is, it actually sounds really great through a subwoofer. It's a really meaty, bassy sound. I mean, it doesn't sound like a car, but... Oh god. Change down gear. And again. There we go. So the controls in this, pretty straightforward. Push up to accelerate, pull back to brake. Press the fire button and up to change up a gear. Press the fire button and down to change down a gear. Now, the reason you have to do it like that is, as I've explained a few times previously on this series, the Atari ST, like most other home computers at the time, only used standard Atari joystick ports, the same ones that had been in use since the 2600. And they were only capable of dealing with one button. Oh god! And so all the joysticks that were available at the time... This is not going to help my qualifying time, is it? Yeah, all the joysticks that were available at the time only had one button. And so if developers didn't want to make players use the keyboard for various functions in their game, which they often preferred to avoid doing, just because the design of most joysticks at the time meant that you needed both hands to hold onto them. Yeah, they have to get a bit creative with the control scheme sometimes. And the press the fire button and up and down to change gears was not an uncommon thing in racing games at the time. In fact, we're used to racing games sort of being press a button or a trigger to accelerate these days. But back in this era, back on the Atari ST, it was actually more unusual to find a game where you press the fire button to accelerate rather than pushing up on the joystick. Okay, so in the qualifying period you've got up to 3 laps to try and get the best possible time. We'll do one more lap. Just see if we can better that terrible performance on the first one. Need to make sure we don't come off at that hairpin that we did last time. So you can probably see from the graphics that this isn't a true 3D racer. It's not using polygonal graphics. It is instead using the sort of vanishing point perspective that a lot of games used at the time. But this was a little bit unusual and distinguished itself from some other games at the time by the fact it was first person. And so that immediately made it feel a lot more realistic, even though it was still based on the same underlying tech as previous racing games had been. And you know what, it's actually not bad. I'm actually liking this a bit more than I did back in the day. This is a bit of a pattern for this. Oh god! That's the old hairpin, isn't it? Yeah, I'm noticing this is a bit of a pattern on this series in general, is that a lot of the games that I feel like I didn't like all that much back in the day, I feel like I was just a bit too young for them. So that I sort of didn't quite appreciate what they were doing or what they were trying to do, or I was sort of reaching a point where I was sort of getting annoyed at them for them not quite being what I wanted them to be, rather than them successfully achieving exactly what they set out to do in the first place. So, I mean, by very virtue of the way that this handles and the way that the graphics are presented and so on, I'm still not particularly convinced that you can call this an especially realistic simulation. But it does a good job. It does a good job of what it's trying to do, which is to be a first-person perspective racing game. Let's skip out and do 8th place. Out of 16, not too bad. Yeah, it's not doing a terrible job of providing a high-speed racing game from a first-person perspective and giving you a feel of competing in a race. Now, the one area where this does let itself down a bit is in the other cars, as you can see. And this is partly a technological limitation, and it's something that always used to bug me a bit with racing games at the time, and that is that if you're driving a real car and you're right up the arse of another car, that car will sort of fill your vision. That will be all you can see. But in this one, because of sort of the limitations on sprite handling and so on, and how big a sprite can be before it becomes impractical to push around the screen, the other cars just never quite look convincing. And also because they're not true three-dimensional objects, it's sort of quite difficult to judge where you are in relation to them as well, and that can make overtaking quite difficult. But we're moving up the pack, we're not doing too bad. Into 4th place, we gain 4. Oh god! Back into 6th. Now, I don't know if we'll do the whole race in this, because 10 laps is quite a long race. But along the way, we should hopefully see some of the things you have to bear in mind in this game, which were things that you hadn't really had to think about in a racing game prior to that point. So things like various systems getting damaged, replacing your tyres, fueling up, and as the race progresses, we should move into night time as well, I believe. Now, I believe what you can do is you can tap the R key. Ah, there we go. Okay, so you can tap the R key for a report on what you're doing. So we've got 6% damage to the bodywork, 1% damage to the steering. Tyres are okay. Still got plenty of fuel. I guess then we move on. That screen there is meant to be like simulating your pit crew, giving you a report on your vehicle. So it kind of pauses the race for that, so as not to distract you. But everything else you do in this game is real time. So when you do stop in the pits to, say, replace your tyres or get more fuel or whatever, then you have to actually make your selections quickly, so as not to lose too much ground in the race. And there are the pits. We don't need to go there just yet. Let's see if we can take this guy. There we go. 9 laps to go. That droning is starting to go right through my skull. Such is the life of a professional racing driver from Scandinavia.
I like the fact there's a rear view mirror in this as well. It's not like a full-on rear view mirror like you'd find in something like Super Monaco Grand Prix or something like that, but it does at least show you when there's someone coming up behind you, which is pretty neat. And again, that was something that you didn't see very often in racing games of the era. At least partly because in sort of third-person racing games you didn't really need that. But in games like this, it's quite helpful to know who's coming up behind you and that sort of thing. Oh, happen, change down, rapidly, very rapidly, change down, please, thank you. One day I'll be ready for that. So because this is a racing game where you don't have an on-screen map or anything, this is a game where you really need to learn the courses. Oops. You really need to learn where the corners are, where the sort of blind turns are, where you go over the crest of a hill and that sort of thing, where the pits are, although you do get plenty of advance notice of the pits on your screen at least. So it's not like some games where it's ridiculously easy to overshoot the pits. And interestingly, you'll notice that this game is continuing to simulate back markers as well. So you may have noticed that we've overtaken a bunch of cars, but we're still in third position. And that's because the other cars are actually being simulated. They're not just obstacles that the game presents you with at regular intervals like older racing games. So if you think of something like pole position, in that game all that did was sort of gradually distribute other cars around the track so that every few seconds you'd encounter one, just so you had a sort of constant stream of obstacles. Now, pole position was just trying to be an arcade game. It wasn't trying to do anything especially convincing. It wasn't trying to sort of simulate being in different positions in a race. Out of my way. One thing this game was praised for quite widely back in the day was its sensation of speed. Now again, to a sort of modern audience that might look quite laughable today, but it's actually not bad. Because it's striking a good balance between not having so much detail that it slows the frame rate to a crawl, but stuff is sort of whizzing by pretty convincingly quickly, which is neat. Apart from the other cars, those are less convincing. But, well, what can you do? How are our systems doing? A little bit more damage to the bodywork. Tyres are okay. Fuel is still fine. Alright, we're all good still. Excuse my phone. Don't use your phone and drive, kids. Oh, move. That's not going to help my damage rating, is it? So, down in the bottom left corner, you'll see that my tyre life gauges have gone up to 1. So, I believe they go up to 9. And once they get up to 9, you're at the risk of blowing one of your tyres. So, you want to go... Oh, my front left has gone up to 2 now. So, at that point, you want to go and get them replaced. Because you don't want to end up with a blowout on your hands, do you? Yeah, I'm actually having a pretty good time with this. I'm not normally big on sort of sim-style races, but this has still got enough arcade DNA in it to make it enjoyable. In fact, I think it might specifically be the fact that it plays like an old Vanishing Point racer that is making this more appealing than modern sim-style races to me. Get out of my way. I don't know where third place has gone. I feel like we're probably not going to win this race. I feel like fourth place is quite respectable for a first attempt. Six laps to go. Well, you know what? We're here now. Let's see if we can make it through. I know it's going to take quite a while, but you know, you can always skip forward if you're getting bored. Because it's going to look much like this, but just do so in the knowledge that you might miss something incredibly witty and funny that I say. You probably won't. See, despite what I was saying about those car sprites earlier, they are massive. And they do take up quite a lot of the road. And that's what I think makes it quite difficult to judge how to overtake. Oh, we're back in third. That's good. Now, report! 20% bodywork damage. Systems are okay, though. Still plenty of fuel. Some of my bodywork's just knackered. That's alright though. As long as the car's working. Oh, don't you overtake me, you cheeky little bastard. You might have noticed over the course of the last few laps as well that the sky is starting to darken. That's presumably the time advancing throughout the day, and so by the end of the race, presumably we'll be racing in night time. Oh no! Oh dear. The systems report is advised. Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine. Crashing into a right side object is a surefire way to lose a lot of time though. because it puts you back on the track and not moving. Whereas if you just clip one of the other cars, you carry on moving. Oh dear. Extremely poor driving going on. I must apologise for my performance. Yeah, sun's definitely going down. 5 laps to go. I don't think it's time to put lights on yet, but... Oh, get out of the way. Ah, there we are. It is time to put your lights on. That's why everything's just brightened up. I just pressed L on the keyboard and put my lights on, and now I can see again, which is nice. That's not a super complex effect or anything, but that works quite nicely. Oh god, we're losing places. It does kind of give the impression that your car has got like massively powerful floodlights on the front of it, which is quite entertaining. No! No! Ah! Maybe it's time to get the tyres changed. It's feeling like a bit of a struggle to get around corners now. I don't know if that's just me losing my concentration or if it is the tyres affecting things somewhat. So let's pull into the pits on this lap. Or let's crash into a roadside object. That's good too. Alright. Change my tyres. And you can... No, you don't need to repair my bodywork, it's fine. Top up a bit on fuel. Alright, let's go. I feel like we're probably going to have lost a few places on that. 52 seconds. And we're still only in 6th though. Do you actually have to turn your engine back on after the pit? So, what I was complaining about with... Oh god. Ah! With what I was complaining about not having to turn the electrics and stuff on in the championship mode, you do at least have to turn your engine on and off when you stop in the pits. I think my tyre wear was affecting my handling, you know. It's feeling a bit more responsive now. Oh, into 5th. Yeah, I'm not too concerned about whatever result I get in this, because, you know, I'm not very good at this. But I'll be happy if I manage to finish further up the field than where I started. That would be nice. So I started in 8th. Go on, get around. There's got to be a better way to do that corner. Can we make 4th? I feel like I've scored a fairly significant victory if I manage to take 4th by the end of this race. I don't feel that's going to happen. I feel I'm probably going to finish in 5th or 6th at this rate. But 4th would be cool. Three laps to go. Yeah, I'm getting proper into this now. Like I say, yet another example of a game that I didn't get for whatever reason when I was a kid. I mean, I appreciated the cockpit view, like I said previously. I really enjoyed sort of the ability to feel like I was sitting in a racing car, but sort of certain aspects of the experience disappointed me a bit when I first played it, but revisiting this now, yeah, it's a decent driving game. For the period. I mean, obviously it's not a patch on what we have now. But when you consider when this came out, not a bad effort at all, I'd say. Especially when you consider it was a team of just a few lads from Yorkshire who put it together. Certainly a far cry from the massive teams we have today. Is that the sun coming up again already? Is that the darkest it gets? I was expecting full-on depth of night blackness. Oh no! Barrel! Oh, we're fine. It's all fine. I don't care if my bodywork has been completely destroyed by the end of the race. As long as I finish the damn race in a satisfactory position, I'll be happy. Get out of the way. Two laps to go, we're nearly there. Nah! I find it quite interesting and quite amusing how much your attitude to something you used to experience a long time ago can change over time. It's like not just this game, but so many other games that I've looked at on the various Atari A to Z series, where things that I have certain memories of, and sometimes those memories are correct, and sometimes they're not. I was correct about the memory of the engine noise in this. But maybe less so about the overall experience of playing it. Although that corner is ridiculous. I should probably try and learn when it is, really, shouldn't I? There's no sign of fourth place and above. Mind you, fourth place and above probably aren't crashing into road signs. It's kind of interesting how you see occasional cigarette advertising down the side of the road in this as well. Just a reminder of how times have changed in some ways. I don't believe that was like an official bit of product placement or anything like that. It was just they wanted to incorporate something from real life that you can maybe see trackside at these places. So yeah, there you are. We've got silver banners that say Silk Cut that don't really bear much resemblance to the Silk Cut packaging from the era, as I recall it. I could be wrong. I've never been a smoker, so I've never paid a lot of attention to cigarette packets, but so we're on the final lap now. Can we make up any more places before the end of the race? That will involve not having a disaster on that corner. I remember where it was. Oh, come on. Oh, and I made it round it without having to change out a third gear. That's better. Doubt that's going to be quite enough to make up any more positions, but we'll see. There's some cars here. One of these might be fourth place. They were not. But never mind. It's all good. Alright, we're nearly there. Don't crash on this last straight, please. And that's it. We're done. God, 40 minutes that took. Well done, you finished in the top 8. That's what we want. Okay, and then after that, you just move on to the next race. There doesn't appear to be like a save game feature in this, which suggests that you have to play through the whole thing in one sitting. That's a lot of racing to do in one sitting. Well, you know, if you're committed to your enthusiasm for motor racing, then, well, you may well want to do that. But we will leave that there for today. I had good fun with that. I like that. Yeah. Not sure it's one I'm going to sit down and spend a lot more time with, given how long just a single race takes. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I can see why it got some positive reviews back then now. That's cool. Alright, so that was Fastlane. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.